Hello, welcome to another devlog. If you're in the Discord, then you may have noticed a change in schedule. Instead of posting once per week, I'm going to try and post once every 10 days. A week to focus on development and 3 days to focus on the video. This video is a little late because for a few days it was raining and I couldn't remove the rain from the recording. Anyways, intro over, let's get on with the devlog part of the devlog. So this first week wasn't really a week. For the first day I took some time off because I was feeling worn out after struggling with editing for a few days. Camtasia doesn't exactly make things easy when it comes to fancy transitions. However, over the next couple of days I worked on the gravity trigger. First thing I did to it was fix a bug. Before, if the player entered multiple triggers and only exited one, the gravity would still be reset rather than taking on the gravity effects of the other trigger that they were still in. Now that that's fixed, it gives a lot more freedom in where the gravity triggers can be placed when it comes to building the levels. Not only have I fixed a bug, but I've also added a new gravity trigger type. This will pull in any objects or objects with a specific tag towards the center of the trigger. Not only that, but I've also added in settings to the inspector to switch between how the trigger should behave. Last thing I did for the first few days was related to the player, specifically grabbing. I finally gave the player the ability to grab and throw any object that has gravity outside of themselves. While doing this, I found I had to limit how fast the player could throw to prevent them from being able to throw anything faster than what should be possible, meaning they can no longer throw a cube across the entire puzzle room and then some. The next couple of days were spent on the player controller. First I added crouching, and while doing this I had to offset the collider so the player stays on the ground when crouching and doesn't clip into it when uncrouching. This also helps keep the player on gravity walls when they crouch, as the collider no longer leaves the surface of the wall. I also added a lerp to the camera to smooth the view when the player crouches to make the movement less snappy. Once I got that working, I wanted to test how well the player controller moved on ramps. I found that when moving up and down the ramp, it doesn't really stick to the ground. When moving up a ramp and then stopping, the player's up and down momentum would stay the same, causing it to do a little hop when they stop. When the player starts to move down a ramp, their up and down momentum is 0, meaning the rigid body would treat it more like walking off a cliff than down a ramp. Not only this, but the player would also slowly slide down any ramps they were on. I did try to fix this myself, but I couldn't get it to work with my current movement. After struggling to stick the player to the ground while moving on a ramp, I decided to restart the movement entirely. I did a bit more research and found another tutorial blog that goes much more in depth into movement than the last one. After following the movement part of the blog, it works even closer to how I originally wanted it, even fixing a bug that I didn't intend on fixing in the first place, where the player would float upwards in their relative direction after jumping out of a gravity trigger. After getting the movement done, something didn't feel right. I was happy that it worked how I wanted it to, but it doesn't feel right taking and tweaking code directly from a blog, even if I am allowed to use it however I want. It's just not right having such a large part of the game taken from a tutorial, because then technically it's not my code. I also found it sometimes doesn't reliably stick to the ground, so I decided after this devlog I'm gonna try and restart the movement and get it done myself. No blogs, no movement tutorials, just me and a bit of maths, of which I'm bad at. Outside of that, I got a couple of basic puzzle elements completed, and I tweaked the player camera a little too. The basic puzzle elements are a simple heavyweight button and a door for it to open. The heavyweight button can be paired with a gravity field that only pulls in cubes to make puzzles a little more interesting. And the tweak to the player camera included lurping its local rotation to 0 when entering a gravity trigger so it wouldn't overshoot and confuse players during gameplay. Final day of the week. Didn't have much left planned for today, but I did switch the project from the HD render pipeline to the universal render pipeline. This should hopefully mean the game can run on lower end hardware, making it accessible to more people, even if it does make it look worse. The final thing I got done was a lightweight button that only the player can interact with. It has two settings, one where it interacts with another object, for example opening a door, and another where it sets the player gravity to a specific direction. When interacting with another object, it has three modes. Toggle, which just switches the object between active and inactive whenever the button is interacted with. Timed, which activates the object, waits for a few seconds, and then deactivates the object. And permanent, which will only ever tell the object to activate. However, it can still be told to deactivate with another button. Throughout this week, I did find a few bugs that I haven't gotten around to fixing just yet. The player's rotation when entering and exiting a gravity trigger is relative to the world and not the player orientation, meaning depending on the direction the player is looking, they will flip forwards, which is not what I want. It should flip more like this. The player gravity will sometimes freak out at the top of a gravity wall if the player doesn't properly enter it. I already know exactly why this is happening, but it's not much of a game-breaking bug to be a priority. The player can still uncrouch even if they are in a spot that is too small for them, causing the collider to be pushed into the floor and possibly clip through the floor. Again, I know exactly why it's happening, but it will be fixed when I redo the player controller for the third time. The final thing is the player camera is weirdly jittery while moving and rotating. It might not be easy to see on recording, and I'm not sure why it's happening. It could just be an editor thing, but I'll have to figure it out during the next week of development. Anyways, that's the end of this video. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed what I had to offer. If you haven't already, please consider joining the Dragon's Lair Discord server, where you can see me post updates on the game's development, share your own work, or just chill. Link is in the description.